Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this Warlords of Draenor raiding guide. And in this video, we're going to be taking a look at the flexible, which is normal and heroic mode difficulties, of ragh in the Highmaul raid. Now in order to complete this fight, you're going to want to bring a minimum of 2 tanks, and then a mixture of DPS and healers up to a maximum group size of 30, as this is flexible raiding. Now the majority of this fight is very shiny, like it's all magic based and the abilities just look really awesome, and for the most part it's all about making sure you are in the right place at the right time and doing the right job if you've been allocated a quote-unquote bitch role, as one of our raiders decided to put it. But nevertheless, let's start the guide, and the first thing you need to be aware of is something called Nullification Barrier. And this will cause ragh to protect himself from all magic, absorbing up to a very high amount of magic damage. So this means if you are a spellcaster and you're attacking ragh, you will knock off the Nullification Barrier and not his actual health. So this is where it will be useful to make sure you bring some non-spellcasting DPSs with you, so that they can also damage ragh, as well as also having spellcasters that bring down the Nullification Barrier. Now while the Nullification Barrier is up, he will gain stacks of a buff called Breaker's Strength, which will cause him to deal 6% increased damage every 10 seconds. Once the barrier is expired, the Breaker's Strength will be removed from him. So the way to remove the barrier is to just keep on damaging him, and then eventually it will just drop off. Now when the barrier has been removed, ragh will then go to the center of the room to his charging rune, and he will begin to recharge over a 20-second period. After 20 seconds, he will then regain the Nullification Barrier on him. And this is where the player quote-unquote bitch role comes into play, because when he moves into the middle of the room, you're going to want one person to go in with him and also gain their own version of the Nullification Barrier. Now, while you're in the Nullification Barrier charging rune area, you're going to take high amounts of damage every second, but you need your healers to spot heal you through this, because every second you're in the Nullification Barrier charging zone, you're going to gain your own Nullification Barrier, and if you stay in for the full 20-second duration, you're going to be able to absorb up to 15 million magic damage, which is very important for another part of the fight, which I'll speak about in a moment. Just keep in mind that the closest person to ragh when he begins charging will be the chosen one that gets the Nullification Barrier on them, and you can only go in once, so you will need to rotate people because you're going to knock the barrier off him multiple times. You'll need to make sure you've got kind of a set list of people that are going to go in and get the barrier. Now, what's the barrier used for, you might ask? Well, there's this lovely little ability called Overflowing Energy, and this is going to cause arcane energy to bleed from the runestone, inflicting a high amount of arcane damage to enemies if it comes into contact with them. So putting that in a non-dungeon journal sense, that means you're going to have these little yellowy, orange and black orbs at the top of the room that you won't be able to see, and they're going to start slowly falling to the ground. Once they hit the ground, or if they hit the ground, they're going to deal a high amount of arcane damage to everyone that's in the raid group. So what you need to do is you need to get the players that have got the Nullification Barrier buff on them to stand in the location on the ground where these overflowing energy orbs are going to land. It's fairly simple to do really, and you can see where they're going to land for quite some time before they do land, so there shouldn't be no excuse for not soaking them. Now throughout the fight, ragh is going to cast an ability called Suppression Field, which is going to cause him to jump to a player's location and then strike the ground in front of them. Now this is going to inflict a high amount of arcane damage in an 8-yard radius, and in addition to dealing this damage, a field of suppressing energy is going to be created, which will silence all players and inflict a small amount of arcane damage every second that you're in it. Now this effect will also silence volatile anomalies. Now these volatile anomalies are an ad that are going to spawn when the Rune of Nullification is active. So basically when ragh's in the middle of the room charging up his Nullification Barrier, you're going to get 3 of these volatile anomalies spawn every 8 seconds. Now DPSing them down is fine, but what you need to be aware of is they have an ability called Destabilize, which is going to cause them to explode upon death, inflicting damage to everyone in the raid group. In order to deal with this, you simply need to get your tank to move the volatile anomalies into one of these suppression fields that are on the ground, just as you're about to kill them off, in order to make sure that players don't take damage, as the anomalies will become silenced within the suppression field zone. Now, as well as all of this, Koragh's also got his own set of abilities you're going to have to deal with, and these fall under a category called Expel Magic. Now, Expel Magic has got 4 different types of magic underneath it, and you're going to have to deal with each of them in a separate way. The first ability is called Expel Magic Fire, and this is going to cause him to expel fire magic, which will inflict a small amount of fire damage every second for 10 seconds to everyone in the raid. So your healers need to be ready for raid-wide hard heal, but heal. And then when the Expel Magic Fire expires, it's going to inflict a high amount of fire damage to anyone within 7 yards. So when this goes off, you need to make sure that you're getting your raid topped up, and then just as you're reaching the 10-second mark, you need to make sure that all of your raiders are spread out with a 7-yard radius between them, as the fire damage will kind of deal damage as it explodes on the players and not from Koragh. So you just need to make sure you're spread out and not dealing damage to other people. His next Expel Magic is Expel Magic Shadow, and this is going to cause him to inflict all players with a heal absorption that will prevent a high amount of healing received. The only way of removing this is simply healing through the Expel Magic Shadow debuff that is on players, so your healers just need to kind of be ready to top players up as fast as they can in order to remove this from them. His next ability is Expel Magic Frost, and this is going to cause him to create an Orb of Frost which will inflict a high amount of frost damage to all players. Now the orb is going to persist for 20 seconds, and it will slow the movement speed of all players within 30 yards by up to 85%. Now the further you are away from the orb, the less of a slow you're going to get applied to yourself. So when the orb spawns, you simply need to move away from it as fast as possible and try and stay away from it, otherwise you're going to have a slow applied to you. And the final Expel Magic you're going to have to deal with is also what you're going to be using to tank switch during this fight, and this is called Expel Magic Arcane. And this will cause Koragh to blast his current target with a corrupted arcane energy that will leave a bolt blast kind of thing of arcane energy at their current location every half a second, and this will persist for 10 seconds. Now, after 1.5 seconds, this area that's been marked will explode and inflict a high amount of arcane damage to anyone that's within 5 yards. This effect will also increase your physical damage taken by 100%. So, put in simple terms, when your tank gets affected with Expel Magic Arcane, they need to run away from the raid as fast as they can in a straight line. Just keep on running, and make sure that players don't run into the little arcane markings that are going to be left on the ground behind them, otherwise they're going to explode and kill off players. Other than that, you need to just keep on tank switching whenever the Expel Magic Arcane debuff is applied, because of the physical damage increase taken debuff that will be placed on your tank, as well as also having the arcane exploding all around them. So that's going to do it for this Warlords of Draenor raiding guide. As always, thank you for watching, and if you are interested in future Warlords of Draenor raiding guides, then please do feel free to subscribe to the channel. Alternatively, if you'd like to view a written version of this guide, then please do head on over to flaskup.com or click on the link that's in the video description below. As always, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.